1960s, and they have microfilm copies of a good set, not a complete set, of the birth records, and much smaller microfilm copies of the marriages and deaths. So that familysearch.org, that's a free website as well. It's completely free. Then there are two sets taken from the local registrars. The Northern Ireland GRO, this is the General Register Office based in Belfast. They have done transcripts of all of the local registrars' records for areas that are now in Northern Ireland. And rootsireland.ie, this is the umbrella website for the local heritage centres. Many, but not all, have transcribed local registrars' records. Some of them are complete, some of them are incomplete. They can be very, very useful indeed. I'm going to come back to those in a few minutes. Family Search, again, this is the Mormon site. This is a list of their Irish holdings. And just the two in red. Well, first of all, the civil registration indexes, 23 million. They have taken the microfilms and transcribed them. The microfilms of the civil registration indexes. So instead of going into the GRO in Dublin and getting your volumes off the shelf, you can go to Family Search and search these. Okay? There are, like every transcript, they have their flaws, but you can search them in your bedroom, in your dressing gown, you know, and it's a price worth paying, as long as you're aware that there are flaws. They've also done births and baptisms 1620 to 1881, 5.3 million records. About 98% of that 5.3 million are from 1864 to 1881. They're the first 17 years of birth registrations. They're not complete transcripts, but they give you the mother's maiden name. They make it possible to give you threads that you can then go on to pull in other sources. So they're a useful shortcut. This is the main event. This is what has really changed the game completely, is irishgenealogy.ie. They now have index records for all births more than 100 years old, for all marriages more than 75 years old, and all deaths more than 50 years old. They also have images of the central registers held by the Registrar General for the vast majority of those. I'll come back to exactly what they do in a second. Let me show you just how it works. This is one of my great-great-great-grandfathers. I'm searching for Luke Roach, born in the Civil Registration District of Tuam in 1869. Okay, a birth. This is what you get. It's not very exciting until you see this link at the bottom, and you click on that, and you get the whole shooting match. The exact townland name, mother's maiden name, occupation, when it was registered, everything. It's there. Okay, so they have complete images of 6.3 million births, 1864 to 1916. They're a little behind, but it's basically one man down in Killarney who's responsible for it. God help us, but he's doing a great job. 1.5 million marriages from 1870 to 1941, so they're not quite back to 1864 for everybody, and 1845 for the non-Catholics, but they are coming. They will come. And 1878 to 1966, the deaths. Again, they have another 15 years to go back to the death records. But again, they're completely committed to doing it, and God bless the Irish Civil Service. It does eventually, you know, the mills grind slow, but they grind exceeding fine. How do I know 6.3 million, 1.5, 5.4? Because one of the joys of the website is you can go in and you can pull up all 6.3 million births, browse them. You can browse them by registration district, by period. You know, you don't have to put in a surname. You can just get everybody called Patrick who was registered in the year 1875. Have fun with them. Okay, that's the joy. And also, on the site, a very discreet little button says more search options, and you're into this wonderful fine. You have the names. You can, for any births after 1900, you can search on the mother's surname, maiden surname. You can search on the spouse's name for marriages, the second party. You can search on the age at death. You can restrict them to particular registration districts, to particular periods. Again, it's a wonderful wonderfully flexible research tool, and it's, again, not necessarily just for genealogy. And one of the things I discovered at the time of the controversy about the baby's home, mother and baby's home in Tuam, I went in and had the death records are here up to 1966. I picked a couple of places where there were mother and baby's homes, put in child's name, age 2, picked out all deaths between 1944 and 1966, and came up with pages and pages of registrations for the deaths of children in other homes like this. And this is the local historian in Tuam, Catherine Corliss, who did this, did it manually, did it by going in and getting out but it's all there, doable now. So it's, as I say, it's not just genealogy. The Find My Past version of what Irish genealogy doesn't have a transcript of, for example, pre-1900, the mother's maiden name. So if you're looking for a John Murphy, you're just going to have to pull up every John Murphy and go through the images one by one until you find what you're looking for. Okay? So that can get tiresome. They Find My Past are going into these original images and transcribing all the mother's maiden names, maiden, that should be, maiden names, and in marriages, all the spouses, the districts, and the father's names. So again, this is free to search. It's not complete as yet. There's a completion date of June, but it's completely free. Okay, and I think again the results link back to the Irish genealogy images, so that will be a big improvement in the quality of the research tool. Just a word about the Northern Ireland one. They did this before Irish genealogy did anything, and they set up a subscription model based on what they've done in Scotland for Scotland's people. And you buy units, you do a search, you pay units then to see the original. But wait, I hear you say, aren't all of these on irishgenealogy.ie up to 1922 for free? Yes, they are. Obviously, the Irish genealogy informed these people they were going to do this. No? Okay. They just drove a coach and four through their business model. It's still there. It's still, you can search in mothers' maiden names, you can search in spouses' names for areas in Northern Ireland, you can't in other places. And obviously for anything after 1922, deaths and marriages particularly, this is the only place you're going to get them. But it has certainly limited the scope of the usefulness of the site. Okay, Roots Ireland. Now, this is from limerick.rootsireland.ie, which is the sort of sub-site for Limerick Archives here, or the Limerick, the Limerick Heritage Centre as it was. And this is, I've just done a screenshot of the civil records that they have. So you have Limerick number 1, 2, 3 and 4, being a city, it's subdivided. And then you have Abbeyside, Adair, Annacotty and so on down. And you'll see, these are the poor law unions, or superintendent registrars districts. They don't match. And this is one of the features of Roots Ireland, is that they've transcribed the local registrar's records. And they don't make a connection with the poor law unions. So that can be, so for example, they're also incomplete, as you can see. For Adair, they don't have the births, but they do have the marriages. The same, there are missing ones. And this is, there's no, I'm not pointing a finger at anybody here. This is, there are more records being added all the time. But one of the features about Roots Ireland, it's a paying website, and it's quite expensive. But to my mind, it's probably the single most useful Irish genealogy website. The thing is, you need to know where the holes are to be able to make sense. So if you're looking for somebody in Askeaton, a birth in Askeaton, you're not going to find it on this website. Okay, but you will find the marriages and you will find the deaths. Okay, there's also this issue of the county boundaries sort of bedevils some of the heritage centres as well. Charleville should be appearing there. because Charleville Registration District has records from Effin, from areas along the border between Limerick and Cork, but it's not there because Charleville is apparently across the border in Cork. So you need to be aware of issues like this when you're using the site. On the other hand, the Rhode Island, when it started out, was very, very frustrating to use. It was one hand tied behind your back. It has come on in leaps and bounds. It is absolutely spectacularly useful now. This is, for example, burial death records in County Limerick. Townland address. Okay, I've put in Castle. I'm interested in Castle Roberts. So Castle, and I put in a percentage mark. That's a wild card. An or, percentage mark, a B. So I'm saying to it, find me every burial and death record that gives a townland address of starting with Castle and then has some letters and an or, some letters and a B. Okay? And this is the result. Okay? The 122, the first two are Church of Ireland burials. All of the rest, you have a complete list of all the deaths recorded in the townland, recording Castle Roberts as the townland address for the death records. And you'll notice there's no surname, there's no forename. As long as you have 4 characters in this field, you can get the records back. So it's absolutely wonderful flexibility. And again, its usefulness goes well beyond genealogy, even though it's Rhode Island. This is anybody interested in local history, in reconstructing, for example, mortality rates or morbidity, disease patterns in various areas. Rhode Island is absolutely essential. Okay. Quickly on. I mentioned looking at the original, and here is one of the best reasons I've ever come across. This is from St. Finbarr's in Cork City in 1804, and the transcript reads, Catherine, daughter of Dennis Kelly and Ellen Ford, sponsor Edward Kelly. And that's it. The original here, which I'm not sure if you can see it, it says, Catherine of Dennis Kelly, soldier, and Ellen Ford, sponsors Edward Kelly, a grey-headed swindler from Brandy Lane, Mary McMullen. Okay. How I interpret this is that Edward was Dennis's brother, and he was given the money to pay the priest, and he didn't. And the priest is making sure there's a description of him here and an address. So if he ever turns up at the church again, he'll get nailed. But I mean, this is there are much more hair-raising things. There are baptismal entries that are like Victorian 3-volume novels. Always look at the original. Okay. Catholic records, particularly. What's online? Again, the biggest collection is the National Library of Ireland, registers.nli.ie. There are images of their microfilm holdings. They have 98% of 95 to 98% of the pre-1880 records from the entire island of Ireland are there. It's the equivalent of going into the old parish register microfilm reading room of the National Library. And believe me, that was no fun. It's easier to do it, believe it or not, online than it was on a microfilm machine. It's still, a lot of the microfilms are appalling. These two commercial companies, Ancestry.com and Find My Past, collaborated to do a transcription from the images. Okay, it's only with a subscription on Ancestry. It's free once you're registered on findmypast.ie. It's not the greatest thing since sliced bread, even though I thought it was going to be. Basically because the images, in lots of cases, the images on the microfilms are barely legible. So if you can't read it, you can't transcribe it. And that's one of the biggest problems. And that's one of the advantages of this site, Rhode Island. It started out as a parish register transcription project, and then in Clare, in fact, Nisi Cleary in Clare was the sole begetter. And then it moved island-wide, and it's still the Catholic parish registers are the single biggest collection of records, but they're transcribed from the originals. Okay, these were FOSS schemes and ANCO schemes and community employment schemes, and also local historians and volunteers involved in doing it. But they were working from the originals, not from these god-awful microfilm images. And they find there are lots of problems with the transcripts as well, but they're not the same problems as you get on Ancestry or Find My Past. And in my experience, they are orders of magnitude better than in most cases, particularly the 1820s, 1830s, when 1840s, particularly when lots of parish priests' handwriting gets very shaky during the famine. So there are also volunteer transcripts. Most of those from Mormon microfilms. Again, the Mormons used to turn up at a sacristy and offer to microfilm parish priests' records and give them a copy. The apocryphal story is that they'd be offered a cup of tea, and because Mormons don't drink caffeine, if they didn't take the tea, they wouldn't get out the microphones. I don't know if that's true. Most of the ones they have are actually copies of the National Library ones. Nobody in the National Library is quite sure how that happened, but somebody gave them copies at some point. Ancestry.com has a separate series taken from a company called eCeltic, which sold parish register management software to local parish priests and did very high quality colour images of the originals and then sold them to Ancestry. So there are about 70 or 80 parishes. Again, it's hit and miss. And a family search, the Mormons are very sensitive about not offending record holders. So they have transcribed Catholic parish registers and put them on family search, but they won't tell you which ones they have. So you may find them as you're searching family search, come across them, but there's no listing of them anywhere. This is the National Library website. You can search on a map, you can search by variant parish names. This is the Ancestry, Find My Past ones. They are not as good, the search interfaces, the kind of townland name, surname variants, it's just not as good. But, I mean, for example, the Diocese of Cashel and Emly was only searchable via the centre in Tipperary town by post for a long time, but all of the pre-1880 images are now there and transcribed in some shape or form, not all perfectly, but it's a starting point. Again, Roots Ireland, I mentioned that, and again, as well as the burials and deaths, you have all of these wonderful search options: the mother's surname, the townland address, the parish, the age, and again, as long as you have 4 characters of any description in the townland address, it can be 4 wildcards, you'll get a result. So, I mean, in theory, you can just put in a parish, 4 wildcards, and get all of the baptismal records for a particular parish. I think that will seriously violate their terms of use agreement, and I'm with them on that. But it means there is maximum flexibility on it. Okay, a couple of words about Roots Island. The National Library microfilms cut off in 1880. There are a few exceptions, but not very many. So for post-1880, particularly 1880 to 1900, and now Roots Island in lots of cases are moving on into the 1910s, 1920s, the only place you will get a transcript, an online transcript of a church record is these. They're very good as well. The National Library missed some registers. For example, the Roscommon town, Sligo town, parts of Louth, and in most cases the heritage centres have picked those up. So for example, Carrick and Shannon, there are 2 sets of registers completely missing from the National Library set that are there on the Leitrim Roots Ireland website. There are a few cases in which the library microfilmed the records, and then when the Heritage Centre went to transcribe them, a register had gone missing. But it's much more often Roots Ireland has a copy and the library doesn't. The centre is outside Dublin, so Presbyterians, Quakers, Methodists. The Limerick site is very good for those as well. Reconstructing from place names. So if all you know is a place name and a Murphy, okay, if you need to be able to zero in, you can do it with the search interface from Roots Ireland. beware, there are, until recently there were no standard forenames. So if you put in B-R-I-D-G-E-T, you wouldn't find B-R-I-G-I-D. That's changed. I'm not sure how good the forename variants are, but they're there now. There are poor transcripts. Again, if you're using an online transcript, you do so at your own risk, simple as that. And missing records. This is, you saw that when I was talking about the civil records for the Limerick Centre. Always when Roots Island, you need to check what exactly it is that you're searching. Is there is that particular parish missing? Are there years missing from the parish? Some centres are better than others at giving breakdowns, but you need to be sure that you check what you're searching. IrishGenealogy.ie also has church transcripts only from these areas, from Kerry, West Cork, Carlow Church of Ireland, and Dublin City Church of Ireland and Catholic. And they won't be expanding that any further. They're actually looking to palm it off on the National Library, the National Archives, unsuccessfully so far. Okay. Coming soon, one of the last untapped offline resources are Church of Ireland registers in the representative church body library. This is now, even though pre-1870 records are still, in theory, state records, the RCBL has come to an agreement with the National Archives that they will act as in loco for the archives. And they have a huge collection of undigitized original records, anything that has survived, and they would be delighted to digitize them. So I know that Ancestry and Find My Past have talked to them. I know that they've talked to the Department of Heritage, Arts and the Gaeltacht. So hopefully. Roots Island, one of the things that's happened after Ancestry and Find My Past did these transcriptions of the National Library microfilms, is it forced Roots Island to up its game, basically. And it has, there are more and more records, they're pushing the boundaries into the 20th century up to the 1920s, in some cases even beyond. Waterford seems to have taken, has come right up into the 1940s, 1950s in some cases, but anyway. And Ancestry, I'm told, is still talking to this parish register management company about buying more images, so you never know what might happen. And finally, I'm just going to say a few words about Griffiths Valuation. This, because it's the only comprehensive mid-19th century census substitute, it's acquired an unnatural importance. It's free to search on askaboutisland.ie. It records all occupiers of property throughout Ireland, and it's an extraordinary piece of work. The only exception are multiple occupiers in tenements in cities. So if you had 13 families occupying an old Georgian house, they won't all be listed. But somebody in a mud-wall cabin in the middle of a field, with a half-acre potato patch, they will be listed. So it is very, very good. It is a tax survey, so it is asking the question, who is in economic occupation? So if you have the Widow Murphy with a half an acre potato patch in one townland and a half an acre potato patch in another townland, the Widow Murphy will appear twice in it. So you need to be aware of that. It's not, you need to look out for houses rather than land. And also, it was published in different years for each county. It was a live tax record, so obviously if somebody died or moved, or the value of the the holding changed, it had to be revised. And those revisions provide a kind of a time-lapse version of the fate of every property recorded in Griffith right up until the 1980s, when the rates were 1977, when the rates were abolished. So you have this, again, it's not just a genealogical resource. What it's mainly used in genealogy is to try and track down living relatives. But you have a sort of decade by decade view of what happened to every piece of property recorded in Griffiths. That's still only offline, at least for the Republic. This is my own family in South Roscommon. You can see this is nothing like a census record. Its main focus is this here. the annual valuation of the rateable property. In other words, how much money should this property be bringing in order that we can tax it. So if it's worth £7 a year and you tax it at 6p in the pound, 7 times 6 gives you 42 pence, which is I'm old enough to remember the rates as well. One of the most important things to keep an eye out for is this. Griffiths was part of this great measuring project that happened in the early 19th century. The Ordnance Survey was also part of it. The standardisation of place names that happened and was used in the 1851 Townlands Index and later was also part of it. These are related to Ordnance Survey maps, these holding numbers, and on the website askaboutirland.ie there are, well, let me just, okay, I want to, okay, just take this, okay. This is an example of a map. You can search for a particular person, you find a holding you're interested in, you can click on the map icon and it will, one of the things you need to be careful about, it's a bit dodgy to use the plus and minus buttons to zoom in, because you start off more or less at Jupiter and sort of eventually zoom in on the townland of Griffiths. But you have the holdings numbered here as they appear in Griffiths. In theory, at least, in practice, there are flaws. And you also have, this map is overlain on a Google map. So this slider here, you can move it here and see the modern Google map underneath the old valuation map. So you can see where the field boundaries have changed. The valuation maps are based on the Ordnance Survey maps, so they have things like field monuments, they have indications of trees and roadways and pathways. Again, this is another one of these, I'll just have one look and you're there 5 hours later following this map. You can, they've crammed too much onto the maps, I have to say. But there are things that are there. The O'Donovan name books, these are the basis for the creation of the town, the standardisation of the townlands. Map versions. There are, in most cases, there are 3 or 4 different versions. They're undated, which makes it really hard to work out what's going on, but they're there. Anyway, this is the okay. Just a couple of other things about Griffiths. It took from 1826 to 1848 to actually bring the project to fruition, to publish the first volume of Griffiths. And those 22 years produced mountains of paper. The majority of it, not all of it, is in the National Archives now, and the majority of what the archives has is online at genealogy.nationalarchives.ie. The records predate the published Griffiths mostly by 5 or 6 years, 3 or 4 years, in some cases by 15, 20 years. The only way, there's again, the transcription that I use is on findmypast.ie. For some reason, the one on the archives website on genealogy.nationalarchives.ie seems to be missing pieces. But they're connected to the images of the originals, again, Mormon microfilms, and they are, for some parts of the country, particularly areas that were badly affected by the famine, they're absolutely invaluable. There are entire villages that appear in the pre-publication valuation records and don't appear in Griffiths at all. Okay, Skibbereen, the hinterland of Skibbereen is one of the ones that's best known. There are dozens upon dozens of families who are just gone by the time of Griffiths. And the post-publication ones. The valuation office in Dublin is the location of the Republic of Ireland revision books. Most areas have 6 or 7, some areas have 9 or 10 separate valuation books where you can follow change by change, year by year, all the way up from the original publication of Griffiths to, it should be 1977. In some cases it comes up to 1990.